So, good evening, dear friends, and welcome to the final session of this 2 days international webcon on enhancing happiness quotient in the age of technology. We have had wonderful 3 sessions. We have had a beautiful keynote address, as I understood from the feedback that you all presented, both on the group as well as in the feedback form that was provided last night. So, final session is on the topic enhancing our well-being in the new age. It's a beautiful topic because when I was discussing with our resource person, what should be the final punch as far as our international webcon is concerned, me and the resourceful speaker, Ms. Raina De Mello, we had discussion on why not having the term, being mindful in the present age. Yesterday, when we were listening to Jeshe Tenzin, he did mention about the word being mindful. And today, there will be a very, what I should say, in-depth discussion on this particular topic of how to be mindful. We have a very young and a resourceful speaker in our midst. May I get her on the screen? We have Ms. Raina De Mello. Very proud. She is an ex-student of St. Aloysius College, Department of Psychology. And presently, she is serving as a clinical psychologist at Narayana Health in Bengaluru. So discussion between us was all about, a little bit of, I should say, on emotional quotient, which no one speaks about normally in a class, because the teachers more so the focus is on intelligent quotient. But I think it's time for us to change. And COVID has given us this wonderful opportunity to interact with such a resourceful speaker, not only across the country, but across the world. And yesterday, Mr. Charles Thompson joining from Australia. Again, the previous night, Jeshe Tenzin joining us from the Virginia, US. And morning today, Rina Castellino joining from Qatar. So COVID has given us this wonderful opportunity to meet and interact with such lovely and very resourceful speakers, which I don't think our physical face-to-face conferences or seminars or workshop would have given us this wonderful opportunity. So for spending her valuable time with us, she will be with us for 1.5 hours till 5:30. And I believe she has done all her appointments at her workplace in the morning itself so that she can totally focus on her presentation and answer all our queries that we have this day. So Raina, on behalf of Government First Grade College Kavur and all my colleagues, on behalf of all the teacher participants, I give a big namaskar to you, and I say a warm welcome to you on behalf of all our participants. So Raina, I invite you to take over the session. So dear participants, I request you all to please keep your audio mute at any given point of time. And if you have any queries, as usual, you have the chat box. You can post the question. I will moderate the session. Over to you, Raina.
Yes, thank you so much for the lovely introduction. I'll just first begin by sharing the screen. And hearty good evening to all of you all, and thank you for joining today's session. Are you all able to see the screen?
Yes, Raina, it's clearly visible. You can go on.
Right. So as the theme of the webcon that has been organized is surrounding the whole concept of happiness and increasing the happiness quotient, especially in the age of technology. Over the past 2 days, you all have heard a lot from various speakers about happiness itself, about Indian culture and happiness, about the concept of Buddhist philosophy, and also of how happiness is also present at through the corporate life and at the corporate life. But what I'm going to keep in mind is perhaps not happiness in its most widely understood term in itself, but perhaps going few steps behind and perhaps talking about happiness from a very mindful perspective, and perhaps also trying to share a very different meaning of the term well-being, which is not just restricted to being happy, right? But before that, in continuation of the theme, let's again talk a little bit about happiness in itself. And if we have to ask, why is it good to be happy? A very common sense answer would tell us because it feels good. That's why it's good to be happy. But when we talk about happiness, most of the time, we generally associate it with a very temporary emotional state that we are experiencing at a given time due to anything that might have happened around us. But now, when there is any kind of positive emotion we experience, it really opens up a repertoire and enables us enables us to go beyond and progress in terms of increased socialization with other people. When we are happy, sometimes we feel like being with other people, we feel like meeting people, we feel like sharing our happiness. It also helps us in increasing our physical well-being, helps in bolstering our immune system, because the lesser stressed we are, better immune system functioning is there. It also somewhere determines the kind of success we have in future, because more positive emotions means perhaps more clarity over goal, better concentration, and also being able to realistically plan the future and be motivated towards it. Also, another important, what researchers have found is when a person is happy or generally undergoing positive emotion, they have a larger tendency to help other people. So these are some of the reasons why we can understand why it's good to be happy in the first place. Okay, but can we raise our level of happiness and be happy all the time? Is also something perhaps we need to think about. It's almost impossible to permanently change someone's level of happiness, because like all other emotions, happiness is also on a spectrum, and the degree to which we experience emotion, like I said earlier, depends on a lot of other factors, perhaps the situation, perhaps maybe our genetic makeup, a lot of things. So keeping our happiness level at 90% or 100% all the time might be idealistic. Why not? It would be great, but realistic, not so. In psychology, there's also something which I came across, which is called as a zero sum theory, explaining that happiness is in fact cyclical, where happiness and unhappy periods, they generally follow each other. So it's kind of like a cycle. Uh, while there's a period of happiness, it almost gets nullified by the next experience that we have, which might be neutral, which might be fearful, which might be unhappy. Then again, happiness. So constantly being in a zone of happiness may not be possible. And it's important to recognize this fact so that we can be realistic and be realistic about that maybe sometimes we can't always be happy. So this will also help us understand that we might perhaps not need to chase happiness all the time. Okay, and there's nothing wrong in it, because as much as we welcome positive emotions, perhaps we can also look at welcoming all emotions that we experience, and not be dismissive of others. Definitely, no emotion is good or bad in its sense. Rather, we can reframe them as pleasant emotions, unpleasant emotions, based on how we really feel them. So, keeping this in mind, maybe we can think of not dismissing, not ignoring, not completely pushing aside and shunning other emotions that we have. Rather, in order for us to enhance our well being, along with happiness, let's also keep in mind the possibility and acceptance that let's also accept other emotions. This brings me to the concept of emotional intelligence, because in order to have good state of well-being, emotional intelligence is also one of the key factors. In very simplistic terms, it means our ability to understand and manage emotions of ourselves and also those of people who are around us. Okay, this is a very simplistic definition of emotional intelligence. And there are many facets of emotional intelligence, and perhaps this might help us understand generally what a person who is somewhere high on emotional intelligence would possess. These are some of the characteristics: being self aware, being aware of what's happening around, being aware of perhaps what's going on in their own mind, their own feelings, and this self awareness will further go ahead and also expand on the empathy that we possess. our feeling of being able to put ourselves in another person's shoes, being able to relate with another person and take their perspective, actually feel perhaps the suffering or happiness that the other person might be able to. Because even the self awareness might help us pay attention to their voice, pay attention to the language, pay attention to their body language, which might help us connect more. It will also help the person again be motivated, like I mentioned some time back about success, right? Realistically reframing goals and being able to, I think, take in stride anything that comes across, whether it might be setbacks, failure, frustration, regulating through it and still being persistent and motivated. It will also help a person be able to regulate emotions. Like I said, as all emotions are welcome, it's not about shunning or dismissing them, but making a choice of how much output of that emotion is required. Feeling the emotion initially or getting triggered by an emotional reaction might be unpleasant, but someone who is emotionally intelligent will make a choice of how do I really display that emotion outwardly. Finally, also, if all these things are present, social skills, as default will get enhanced. Person will be able to communicate better, communicate effectively, listen better. Perhaps someone who's very emotional intelligent, even in terms of, any conflict that arises, may not argue so much, may not use a lot of harsh words, may not just walk away. Okay, this can, perhaps you all can understand this in the context of, teaching and, relating with students. So how much of emotional intelligence do we really possess when we are, at the workplace? For I guess most of y'all, it would be the college setting, about being self-aware, empathizing with the students, motivation to do well, and also with the goal aligning with students welfare ultimately. Perhaps being lecturers and being very well qualified professors, you'll also have a personal life. So somewhere regulating how maybe some distress from the personal life doesn't necessarily spill onto the work, perhaps doesn't spill onto some of the students, and also effectively, engaging in social skills with the students to help understand their mindset better, communicate better, listen to their concerns, and this will somewhere totally sum up and make us more emotionally intelligent. But now the point is, we need emotional intelligence to have well-being in life. By well-being, I mean generally feeling satisfied in life and generally feeling content, not just feeling happy all the time. So there's a difference here. So because we need emotional intelligence to be, to enhance our well-being, we need something for our emotional intelligence, because this is a skill which really can be cultivated, which can really be enhanced with some knowledge and with some practice, with a lot of reflection. What is it that we need to build on our emotional intelligence? The answer to that is quite simple. It's the first point over here, self awareness, which boils down to the concept of mindfulness. Now, the area of mindfulness is a very well researched area, especially in modern psychology. And it's not a very foreign concept, to be honest, though a lot of research work might have been done in Western literature. But mindfulness was a very powerful tool that has been used for centuries by Hinduism, by Buddhism, and perhaps in various religious texts also you might come across being mindful, being aware of what we do, right? It's almost like a century old technique, and it's one sure way of getting to the root of anything we experience. So it's about accepting whatever emotions come, catching yourself, and just being. Very simplistic definition of mindfulness would be engaging and paying attention wholly in the present moment. So some of the keywords in mindfulness would be high amount of attention in the moment and from time to time. Another important aspect of being mindful, okay, while it's important that we are in the present moment, Anything can happen in the present moment, any emotion we might experience or anything we might be confronted with. Another one of the most one of the hallmark of mindfulness, if I must to say so, it must be being non-judgmental and being accepting whatever comes in front of us, and accepting that it's not really good or bad, but rather let me experience it completely first before I decide what do I need to do about it. So that is how you engage wholly in the present moment and be connected to what is actually happening around you. This must be happening to a lot of us quite often, right? Perhaps when we least expect it, suddenly we might come across or we might think of some things that we don't want to think about. Okay, perhaps especially when we are about to sleep, maybe our brain picks up on some of the events that might keep us up. We might ruminate over it, we might think about it a lot. And what do we generally tend to do when this happens to us? Whenever any kind of thoughts come up or whenever any kind of emotions come up, what we generally tend to do is tell ourselves, I don't want to think about it. Why am I thinking about this right now? Why now only I have to feel like this? God, please do something so that I just stop feeling this. This is often what we do. And like I said before, these are subtle ways in which we completely disregard or, dismiss our emotions. What can happen over here? Firstly, we cannot control things that come in our mind because, like our eyes see what they see and our ears hear what they hear. The job of our brain is to think, and we can think anything. But we decide what thought is pleasant, unpleasant, good, or bad, right? The thought in itself doesn't have much meaning until we give it a meaning. So oftentimes we might have given too much importance or over importance to some things or some aspect of a situation that may bother us. If we don't give that much importance to some of the things, naturally it wouldn't bother us. But when we tell ourselves, I don't want to think about it, I want to stop thinking about this should not come to my mind again, we are engaging in something called as thought suppression. One is it's going against the acceptance principle. Secondly, by thought suppression, you're further fueling the importance given to it. Because why would you need to stop something if it's not so important, right? Uh, Indirectly, you're fueling the importance. And research has also found the more you tell yourself, I shouldn't think about this, I shouldn't think about this, you will think about it. That's a very funny reality of life, which we call as also the rebound effect. It's as simple as, maybe you all can try it later. For around 10-15 seconds, imagine of a pink monkey. Imagine a pink monkey if you close your eyes, and then all of a sudden, if I tell now stop thinking about a pink monkey, stop thinking about it, stop thinking about it, your mind will think only about that. Okay? So thought suppression, trying to control your thoughts so much, does not work. So perhaps let's accept this, that thoughts will come to our mind and thoughts will go. Any thought can come. We have to determine what meaning the thought has, or just perhaps treat every thought like a neutral thought and somewhere decenter from it. Perhaps instead of feeling the thought completely, keep some distance from it and think, okay, right now I'm thinking of this. So you are somewhere adding a more intellectual component, which will help you recognize what you're feeling at that point, and somewhere also help you name what you're experiencing. This picture, I think, might very accurately explain what having a full mind would be rather than what it would be like to be mindful. So the person on the left, okay, in the present moment, what's happening is that there are trees in front and there's a sun and they are walking. That's what the person on the right is paying attention to, just what is there in front of me right now. Perhaps for the person on the right, thoughts may come, but it will also pass by. The person is not going to hold on to that thought and, beat along with it or, fight it so much. But if you look at the person on the left, the person is in the present moment, yes, but what else is the person paying attention to? A lot of things that are perhaps from the past or the things that are from the future. So it would obviously lead to a lot of mental overload, a lot of cognitive overload for the person. Whereas for the person on the right, there is hardly much interpretation happening because it's just a very neutral present that a person is experiencing. Now, if we need to ask, but why do we need to practice this mindfulness? Why do we need to be so much in the present? Why do we need to, pay attention to a lot of things that's happening around us at a given time and accept whatever is, coming our way? Simple reason is this. A lot of times when we are suffering or we are in pain, I'm not saying all the time, but generally a lot of times, it's because our mind is somewhere stuck either in the past or it is worrying about something that's, might happen or may not even happen in the future. How much are we actually in the present, and how threatening is the present as such, or how painful is the present as such? It can be for a lot of people, especially when they're undergoing trauma and are in the present moment. But that's now a whole different topic of discussion. There obviously acceptance might not be easy, and I'm not saying we'll have to be acceptful of everything that comes, even if it's injustice. So I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking more in terms of some of the simplistic things, some of the simplistic experiences we experience on a day-to-day life, which can really be managed. So that is what is the agenda of today's presentation. Not really talking about those very sensitive issues of trauma, because that would again require more attention. So yes, mostly it's the past or the future that tend to bother us. Okay. Some of the advantages of doing it is, again, once there is increased awareness, thoughts, feelings, and sensation in the present moment, by this what would happen is we would somewhere stop being in a very autopilot mode. I'm not sure if some of you all can relate to this or not relate to it, but it can happen to us sometimes that when we are quite low or when we tend to be mindless, what is actually happening is our mind is in an autopilot mode. Thoughts are coming, we are not actually paying attention to it. And when this happens, what actually happens? We allow our mind to wander along with it. We allow our mind to wander along with the negativity and, question, cross question, shun ourselves, shun others. So that acceptance component doesn't really come because we are wandering so much with that thought, fighting it so much, right? So mindfulness will help you catch yourself, when you're experiencing what is experiencing. A simple way to actually catch yourself is one, if you're just able to pay attention to it, it's good. Somewhere using some verbal cue. For example, if you feel there's a tendency for your mind to wander a lot, maybe saying something like, okay, let me come back. Let me come back. Okay, back here now. Okay, let me come to the present, or what's happening right now. So when you're asking yourself these questions, you are almost anchoring yourself back to the here and now. Okay. Now, any situation or emotion we're experiencing, if there is awareness, what might happen? There is a very less chance of being impulsive. There is less chance of doing things without thinking. Sometimes it might happen. We say things, maybe we might have had a tough time with a student, or maybe a spouse, or maybe a relative or children, in the social relation context. Uh, Before we make any decision, we might not put so much thought to it because we might not be aware of what mood state we are in. So when you are able to catch yourself about what you're feeling, you are giving yourself an advantage here. You are slowing down time. You are slowing down your mental process, where you give yourself a break, where you slowly allow the experience to sink in, and you are taking advantage of the time to make a decision of how to react, whether you are amongst people, whether you are alone. Perhaps rather than being, uh, you know, just swamped by the emotion, you are labeling the emotion. By being aware, you're able to name it. You're able to tell, okay, I'm feeling upset right now. Okay, I know I'm feeling irritated right now. I know I'm feeling fearful right now. So when you are being aware, you are giving perhaps a name, a neutral name to what you're experiencing. When you name your experience, you are able to tame your experience. So perhaps this is another way you can remember it. I need to name my experience so that I can tame it a little better. And tame in the sense, you are not swamped by your experience or emotions, but rather you have it somewhere under a very manageable level. So that is an advantage of being mindful. Another important way is you can enhance your emotional and social skills. Definitely, if you are able to tame it and we have recognized that we are feeling something, very less chances that we will actually, you know, impulsively act, or we will shout at someone, or we will yell at someone, or we might pick fights, because we know right now I'm angry, I have a tendency to do this. So maybe now, what are the choices I have? Maybe I'll tell the person I'll talk to him or her at a later time. Perhaps I'll take a break. Perhaps I'll go and drink some water. Maybe I'll go for a walk. So when you slow down that time, you're allowing yourself different options. Do I need to problem solve this right now? Do I need to do something for my emotional? So what do I do? So you are giving yourself the chance to say, what do I do? How do I communicate? What do I tell the other person? That's the advantage that you're giving yourself here. Another very important and interesting finding that has come from some research based on mindfulness, from how much ever I have read, is that it also helps in increasing your intellectual skills. Intellectual skills mainly in terms of, your productivity and output. Because when we are mindful, it's almost like we are stretching the capacity of our attention span. We are able to concentrate better because our mind is just at the present and it's not really carried away by so many things happening around us. Okay, so because of that, concentration gets stretched, and something which we call as working memory means at a given time, how much information can we hold in our mind, keep that information for a while, manipulate it, and use it. That capacity also increases. So now we have understood perhaps that one cannot be emotionally intelligent without being mindful. As it has various benefits, it's quite important to make us aware of what we are going through and how we can sail through it. But now the point is, we've spoken so much about mindfulness and perhaps how it might have a lot of benefits, but how do we actually do it? One is, like I said, you can catch yourself by saying some verbal sentences to bring yourself back. Okay, or else you can use some mindfulness breaks throughout the day so that you get into the practice of paying attention to what is happening right now. This is something which I have personally started to do during my course of psychology, when I was doing my MPhil, when I was training, because I thought that if I really need to incorporate this in some of the therapies that I do, I will need to see it for myself to really believe it. And the more I started engaging in more mindful tasks, I realized it became easier for me to be mindful. It became easier for me to perhaps think and then respond rather than just say what comes out of my mind and then later regretting it and then thinking about it. So it has really helped me slow down, pause, and not have the urgency to respond to anything, or not have that urgency to respond on my impulses. Right? So this is also something that makes me feel satisfied because I have lesser things to regret about. So taking mindfulness breaks throughout the day. Simple way is just by focusing on your breath. Okay. In case if this has been mentioned in yesterday's talk about a very formal meditative practice which can be done, perhaps finding a very comfortable place at your home or at your workplace where there is preferably lesser noise, and just closing your eyes and paying attention to how you're breathing, because breathing is one thing which is actually happening in the present moment. So paying attention to your breath as is, without really trying to change it or manipulate it, but simply paying attention to your breath. If thoughts come, let them come. Acknowledge that, okay, this thought has come. Let it go gently on its own. And if you want, again, come back to your breath. So it's about using your breath as an anchor. For a while, pay attention to your breath. Then you can move on in the same meditative posture. Pay attention to your body sensation, perhaps how your back feels against the chair, perhaps how your legs feel on the floor. So just pay attention to how your body feels or how different organs of your body feels. Then you can slowly expand into paying attention to sounds. So pay attention to whatever is happening around you, whatever you can hear. It could be simple things as maybe the clock ticking. It could be of someone talking in the corridor or someone, or it could be the sound of traffic. So there might be different sounds that you might hear. And when you're paying attention to it, perhaps don't judge it whether you like it or not, but just acknowledge that you have heard the sound and then let it pass. And then you can spend some time being mindful just about your thoughts. Pay attention to thoughts as they come to your mind and as they go, without really chasing it, without stopping it, without fighting it, just accepting that this thought has come and let it gently pass. Because understanding and reiterating that formula to ourselves, that if something starts, it will generally end. Likewise, even if I'm suffering or if I'm in pain, it will end. But do not confuse this concept of mindfulness as pseudo positivity or toxic positivity. It's about, like I said, even if you're having a hard time, and there are things that genuinely makes us feel upset or painful, and we genuinely suffer. But sometimes if you are mindful and think that, okay, I know right now it's a difficult time and right now it's hard, you're accepting it by saying it and saying that, but I can hope that this gets better, and I can hope that I can work to my capacity, see what I can do, and then I'm sure this will also come to an end. So that's perhaps a very mindful approach to your suffering. Another way in which you can engage in mindfulness is perhaps just opening up the window, paying attention to leaves that are there, or just paying attention to the clock tick. So you can choose anything to focus on. Okay, in the end, I'm going to share a list of, something you can do for 30 days, one activity each day to incorporate your mindfulness. Another way you can somewhere seep in this concept of mindfulness is maybe if you have some moments where you have been mindful, perhaps in your department or in your college or maybe at home, and if it worked for you, perhaps you might have used it to prevent an argument, or you must have used it to pay attention to someone, right? You can maybe share these insight with some of your close people so that you're also able to model this behavior to another person. Perhaps someone might get inspired by you and they might start practicing it, right? If you want, you can switch off for a while if you need to. I know in the age of technology, we're generally logged in, and you all might have already heard about maybe taking some screen time off. So switch off whenever you'll need to. If perhaps there is a tendency to worry a lot, and through mindfulness, if you all might have been able to recognize that, and if you feel that the worry is very continuous and maybe just by merely accepting it, it might not go, perhaps these are some of the things which can be worth asking yourselves. What are the things under my control? Am I unnecessarily worrying about the worst thing that can happen? When I have been stressed in the past, how have I managed it? And what are the things I can do to help myself and be positive? So somewhere consciously paying attention to these kind of statements when we ask, these kind of self-affirmative statements, we do recognize that, we are much better than we think we are when it comes to handling stress. It's just that we need to pause and reflect, which we might have not done earlier. But once we start doing that, we also cultivate a sense of emotional intelligence. We save a lot of relationships. We avoid unnecessary arguments and fights. We are better able to accept any strong wave of emotion, and we're able to come out of it. We are able to see them melt away, or we perhaps do something about it. But just the recognition of, you know, acknowledging it goes a long way in making us more mindful, in perhaps making us more aware, and ultimately being acceptful of whatever comes. That's how essentially, that's my take on how someone can enhance overall well-being and their satisfaction from life. So this is something to share with you all of how perhaps it can be a practice to do mindfulness in a very day-to-day basis. Perhaps maybe when you're applying lotion, pay attention to how you squeeze out the cream on your hand. Pay attention as you're gently rubbing your hands with the lotion. Pay attention to the smell that comes from it, the fragrance that it has. Pay attention to how it's getting absorbed in your skin. So you're paying attention to the entire process as it's being done. When you're having bath or you're taking a shower, pay attention to how the water feels on your skin, how perhaps the soap is getting lathered, how it is foaming up, how it's getting rinsed away. When you're patting yourself dry with a towel, just pay attention to the sensation of that nice texture of the towel onto your skin. So it is not that when you're having bath your mind is somewhere else, or you're worrying about something else or thinking about something else. You are keeping your mind on the shower, you're keeping your mind on what is happening right now. Okay, perhaps going for a 5 minutes mindful walk, paying attention when someone's giving a smile. If you're listening to music, paying attention to the lyrics or the beats. When you're doing the first thing in the morning, maybe having your glass of water or having a glass of lemon water, anything that you all might have, rather than doing it in a hurry, you sit somewhere and then you pay attention to the water that you're drinking, the way the glass feels in your hand. Okay, when you're cooking, mindfully cooking. When you're eating, this is something I would prefer to do, and what I sometimes even tell some people, that when you're eating, maybe avoid using your phone that time, or perhaps avoid watching TV. If you can, eat by yourself and just enjoy the taste of food. That itself is great. Paying attention to the textures, colors, flavor of the food that's in front of you, that it also makes us feel more appreciative, and a lot of these exercises makes us feel a lot more grateful. And ultimately, even by default, gratitude is something that improves by doing a lot of these mindfulness activities. To sum up in very simplistic terms, it's good to be mindful for our overall experiences, which will build up on our emotional quotient. And this in turn will help us be generally satisfied in life, at least most times, if not all times. Okay, so with this, I end the formal presentation, awaiting some of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Raina. It was really beautiful. Is it possible that you come, every day morning on the laptop of every person and tell them this is what you need to do for the day? I think 30 days tips you have given every month. If you do that, I think we can live a beautiful year and beautiful life ahead. So, I'm very, very thankful. It has been really beautiful. I was importantly, throughout the session, yesterday I did mention when Geshe Tenzin was talking, he did one small meditation exercise for maybe around 2 to 3 minutes. His entire session of that 45 minutes that he spoke was meditation itself for all. And even, I was very carefully listening, and you'll be very proud that your teacher Shalini Ayappa madam was also listening to you. She's right here. Yeah. And, that icing on the cake, as you said, 30 days of mindfulness. And in that, I understood, large impact of this most of the things that we don't care of. You mentioned about that bathroom towel. You mentioned about that soap. You mentioned about that sip of water that goes, below our throat down. All these things we do it in urgency, because when you are saying that, I remember, though the college is very close to my house, I have breakfast at around 8:50 and 9 o'clock I am in college. So sometimes I imagine, what breakfast I might have had. So now, after listening to you, I think we need to really slow down. That's what I believe. So thank you, Raina, for that wonderful presentation. And definitely there are a lot of questions that, that has been come forward. Participants have put forward. Already you have the appreciation from Dr. Pratibha. She says, beautifully phrased explanation of the concepts. She has already written down. Okay, let us begin with a basic question. I believe you have already answered that in your presentation. This is a question from Dr. Raghavendra from Purna Prajna College in Udupi. He says, how does emotion influence one's health? You did mention it, but you can elaborate on it.
Right. So emotions experiencing one health, emotion in itself might have little to do, but it's largely the interpretation that we have of the emotion is what fuels certain physiological responses in us. For example, when we are very angry, a lot of research has shown that people who tend to be very angry, there is a risk of cardiac conditions. Or when a person is very fearful or very stressed under prolonged stress, right? There is a stress hormone that is released in our body, which is called cortisol. That is also linked to a lot of diseases, especially cardiac in nature. It somewhere works as an immunosuppressant, and overall our ability to even adapt. We feel physically tired. We might have a lot of thought block. So our cognitive function gets affected. Emotionally, there is a wear and tear, and also physiologically putting a lot of load.
Correct. Yes. Thank you, Raina. I will move on to the next question. This is a question from Madam Nalini from Maharani's College in Mysore. She says, when a person is overburdened with heavy workload, how do you work with mindfulness?
Yes. So this is a very real life example and very real life situation that all people who are, who are working, there will be periods that overburdening is happening. What do we generally do when we are overburdened? Sometimes we might either curse ourselves. We might, just be like, oh, why do I have to do this right now? We engage in a lot more of that kind of dialogue. Perhaps if you bring to a mind, okay, I know there is a lot of work to do and it is making me feel a little uncomfortable, or it's making me feel very fearful. So first is recognizing. So how do we apply mindfulness principles to this? Is recognizing that, yes, I know I have a lot of work to be done. It might take me a long time. What can I do right now? Would I like to maybe just sit down for a minute and maybe do nothing at all? Would I want to take a minute and just go and drink some water? Would I want to work on this first? So you're slowing down and you're asking yourself, what do you think you can do which is best for you? Because there's no one solution for everyone. For everyone, there can be different ways of de-stressing. But when you're mindful, you're allowing yourself to give yourself those options.
Okay. I think that's very well answered. Thank you for that, Raina. There's another question. This is from Madam Anita from Capitanio PU College. She's asking you, how do we remain emotionally calm when we have certain intuitions? Intuitions like, causes a kind of anxiety. So how do you think, your remaining emotionally calm, being mindfulness, would help at that point of time when there is a lot of anxiety?
Yes, when there is a lot of anxiety, again, it's an unpleasant emotions. Perhaps at that point, one is accepting. Again, first step is to accept that you're feeling uncomfortable, and it might help going one step ahead and perhaps somewhere slightly challenging that I know I'm thinking like this, but is it really helping me at this point? Has it really happened in the past that my intuitions have come true? What is the evidence for me to believe and feel so anxious that this might in fact come true? So reflecting on it, spending some time to reflect, because the more you engage in a more intellectual dialogue with yourself, you're perhaps opening up the possibilities and thinking, am I very selectively looking at the worst possible outcome when there might be no evidence to really support that?
Okay. I think more so you're talking about keeping in mind the worst case scenario. If this, what may be the maximum thing that may happen, like.
What might be the
And
maximum? And even if it were to happen,
yeah,
you know,
you are ready for it.
I can do. What is it that I can do then?
Yes, yes.
And also believing that, okay, a difficult time may come, but I've also
Okay.
seen a lot of difficult times in the past.
Correct.
And if I've done it in the past, why not now? Why not in the future?
Okay. Is introspection, talking to oneself, beneficial? Because you did mention.
Yes.
And is there a specific time, as soon as you get up and today I'm going to live a beautiful day, no matter what, or at the end of the day, before I close my eyes, tomorrow is going to be a beautiful day. Is
Can
there
we
a specific time?
Uh, it would be ideal. It's actually very nice that you mentioned. Why not sandwich our day between these two mindful experiences? You
Wonderful.
wake up, you wake up with a very pleasant and welcoming mood that, okay, I accept everything that's going to come to me in the day. And
Okay.
perhaps when you maybe you can say some self-affirmative sentences that
Yeah.
I know that I'll be able to get through this day, no matter
Okay.
come what may. And when you're sleeping, perhaps reflecting on the things that have gone well for you, paying
Yeah.
gratitude. So that will also help you relax and even sleep.
Correct. Correct.
So
So, and another,
these two
yeah.
mindfulness sessions, perhaps.
Yeah, and you mentioned about sandwich, and sandwich is really good for health if you have these two thoughts as the top and the bottom layer, as you
Yes.
said. Okay, good one. Now I'm coming to my real question. Why did I mention introspection, talking to oneself is beneficial? Is though we start our day, I want to start my day on a positive note, but sometimes in the course of the time, I am not myself. Things go really wrong. I don't say maybe say 3 days out of a week, not the entire week. 3 days out of the how, though we try to be positive, it is little difficult
Yes.
to.
So over here again, the whole point is not to kind of fall into this very toxic positivity, which kind of talks about let's just be happy all the time, let's smile all the time. I mean, no, sometimes it's really not possible when the situation doesn't warrant it. And sometimes it can be difficult to always look at the positives and always draw upon on things that are going well. In times like this,
Okay.
we'll be telling ourselves, I know it's a difficult time. And at this point, it is in fact difficult for me to see anything positive coming out of it. And,
Okay.
maybe I'm not able to even solve this problem or this experience that I'm going through. But maybe I can just do some things to take care of myself till then, till I start feeling
Okay.
good again, start feeling hopeful again.
Okay. Raina, in between that answer that you gave, your voice was breaking a bit, but I think you can cover up for the questions that I ask and the answers that you give in the whatever you said. All right. This is a very important, and an interesting question that everyone is asking. If there is one person whom I have seen, sitting across all the 4 sessions at one place without moving, focusing, looking at the screen, looking at the ceiling, it's Dr. Purushottam. He is right there in front of me. And he is asking a question. What impact will future digital technology have on health and well-being of a young people?
Yeah.
Future digital tech have on health and well-being of a young people?
While it will definitely increase to some amount of increased screen time, I'm not sure if I might be able to very accurately answer the question, but definitely since there is a lot of screen time, sometimes what may happen is we might be very passive.
Okay.
We are a very passive recipient. Also, perhaps since technology is moving on to something which is very fast paced and offers us a lot of things, what happens is we are just sitting, not really thinking and absorbing everything that comes our way. So perhaps it might put us in a space where we might not actively think, or we might not actively think about a lot of things. This was a very interesting thing that I had heard from someone speak, and I was also discussing this with Shalini ma'am. How earlier days when there was no technology, people would read a lot of books for leisure and for their hobby. And
Okay.
the person mentioned that people were willing to spend times and to stretch their concentration, imagination, to do things that they liked, to do things
Okay.
that made them feel good.
Okay.
Later on, it went on to movies, which is maybe 2 hours,
Okay.
which was maybe 1 hour. And as
Okay.
technology advanced, people went on YouTube, where maybe they have to pay attention for just 10 minutes or 20 minutes to
Okay.
absorb one content.
Okay.
Now is the age where there is platforms such as TikTok or Instagram, where the videos are hardly 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 1 minute. And
Yeah.
honestly, how much, I mean, definitely it's useful. But if we look at it, it's just we are scrolling, scrolling, scrolling.
Yeah.
What are we actually absorbing? We are very passive that way. Are
Correct.
we
Correct.
making choices? So that way, I think attention span definitely will get affected.
Yeah.
Perhaps you might also come across a lot of content that might be very triggering. We might
Yeah.
resort to technology use somewhere as one of the only ways to de-stress, which
Okay.
I feel might be a little problematic when we stop appreciating other things and just turn to technology.
Okay, I think that's a good one, and Dr. Purushottam is very happy with your answer as well. But one thing that I have noticed, last week we had a 1 week faculty development program, and I used to put messages there in the group, and I realized there, in spite of putting messages, do this specifically, people were not reading those, and they were asking, yeah, that is what lots of messages in between, some important ones have already missed out. So one participant suggested to me that why not have a webinar on how to read messages on WhatsApp and understand it first of all. That is what that troubles many others as well. That's why if the participants of this international webcon are wondering why do I keep the group closed always, only admins can message, so that the specific information reaches out to them. That is important. Or else when a group is done, there are so many disturbances in the sense, even
Right.
though the morning is not good, it's good morning for everyone. That is what happens. Yes. This is a question from Dr. Maria from Honnavar, a young teacher. She's also, I think, your batchmate in Aloysius. Now she's teaching in government college in Honnavar. She says again about how to be mindful when you are stressed, even though we want to live in the present, still live in your present and be mindful of all the things in our daily life. So how to deal with it?
Right. Especially if you have a tendency of thinking about the past a lot. Like I
Okay.
said, it comes, and I'm not saying it's a very easy thing to be mindful always. It is really a skill that needs to be done over and over again till it becomes almost automatic and it becomes easy for ourselves to catch ourselves.
Okay.
One is coming back to the point of thought suppression that I mentioned. And I believe there's another question also based on that. That where is the need to suppress that emotion of the past?
Okay.
And like I said, the more you fight it, it will trouble you more. It's not going to leave you. Rather,
Okay.
acknowledging that it's not a good experience that I'm thinking about, but this is how it is right now for me,
Okay.
right? To temporarily perhaps pause your mind, a useful technique would be coming back to focusing on your breath. Why
Okay.
so? Because there is an inverse relationship almost between the thoughts and the breath. So
Okay.
when you're focusing on your breath, you will notice that there are hardly any thoughts in your mind. And you will
Okay.
notice that when you're thinking a lot, you're not aware of how you're breathing.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so you can slow down the mind and perhaps temporarily let the thoughts melt away by having one thing to focus on. That is the
Okay.
breath, which is very neutral, till you
Okay.
start feeling calm. It may take a couple of minutes, it might take perhaps 4 minutes or 5 minutes. By
Okay.
doing this, I'm not saying the problem will get solved, but you will find something to hold on to, something like an anchor that I
Okay.
know a lot is happening around me, but I am still grounded. I have still not
Okay.
lost my sense of sanity or I've not lost sense of control. I'm still
Okay.
able to be perceptive. So it's about
All right.
having that confidence there.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Raina. Next question is from Madam Reema. She is from Meerut, Uttar Pradesh. She says, obviously, you did explain, about living in the present. But can you give some tips how to get rid of our past not so good moments? She has just mentioned past moments because past good moments, obviously you would like to retain and you would like to think about it, but not so good moments of the past, which we can avoid. Like any tips that you can give, any ways that we can avoid thinking about not so good ones?
Where is this need coming from to avoid? Where is this need coming from to stop it? Now, again, coming to the point, that is where a lot of times we get stuck, and that's why we suffer.
Okay.
We are not really being acceptful there. Believe me, once we accept a lot of things, and I'm not saying you have to like it. I'm not saying you have to like the negative experience or the past experience. But if you're able to somehow make peace that, okay, it's happened, it's not going to bother you as much.
Okay.
It's not going to bother you. So perhaps maybe allowing ourselves to think that maybe I don't need to get rid of it. Why to get rid of it?
Okay. No, maybe you can keep it as a criteria saying that there cannot be a worse moment than this.
Perhaps that can also be done.
Okay. Yes, I hope Madam Rima is happy with what takeaway or tips that she has got from you.
Else we can ask ourselves then, like, like I mentioned also in one of the slides, that am I unnecessarily worrying
about things that are not within my control?
Where is this need to control?
Yes, good. This is a question from Madam Sushma. She's from Sira, Tumkur district. She says, presently, present days, there is a talk about something called adversity quotient. Even I did read it almost a week ago. So do you think adversity quotient is related to emotional quotient, creativity quotient? Because for everything today, the word quotient is a suffix done. So what do you think about these terms?
I am not too well read when it comes to I am not too familiar with the whole concept of adversity quotient, but what I understand it, perhaps it's linked to resilience, our ability to bounce back, and despite having adversities and setbacks, our ability to still come back. Yes, there is a link. So we can't really isolate anything which is psychological in nature, any kind of human trait that we have or psychological trait that we have. We can't really isolate it from one another. They all have a very beautiful interplay, and sometimes separating them and compartmentalizing them, my personal opinion, I don't think might be very realistic or very good. They all seep into one another. It flows into one another. Like you mentioned, introspection. That also flows into what we are speaking about. Introspection, where it comes to any adversity, being resilient. Introspection would help us. Emotional regulation skills would help us. Emotional quotient would help us. There is a relation with all of these.
All right, good. Raina, there are questions coming on from different states now. So we have had Uttar Pradesh, now Chandigarh, and now we are moving to Kerala. Madam Akshata is asking you what mindfulness, and I will combine Madam Akshata's question as well as Madam Sushma's question, because I read Madam Sushma's question only a part of it, so that I thought I would combine. Madam Akshata is asking what mindfulness means for students. How do we practice classroom mindfulness? That is one. And Madam Sushma's second question was, any inputs for enhancing students' creativity quotient? Since both are relating to class, so I put it together.
Right. So mindfulness would mean the same for almost all age groups. The concept, the core concept in itself would not really change, but perhaps the applicability would be different for everyone.
Okay.
Right? It will be all pervasive in all situations. Perhaps some of the ways in which mindfulness can be introduced in the classroom, and very simple ways. Maybe before beginning the class, this is something that our lecturer would do with us when I was in masters. Like, let us spend 30 seconds and just gather ourselves here. Let us spend 2 seconds in reflections. So perhaps we might have been caught up with something that happened in the previous period, or we might have been worried about a test, but you're just spending those 30 seconds to be with yourself. So any task for a child which involves them to just be with themselves, maybe, and giving them breaks where they're not doing anything. That is something that can be done. Perhaps also when they are maybe feeling tense, some relaxation training, the deep breathing, like I mentioned, can be introduced. Perhaps simple ways in being mindful is make sure that when they are submitting their work or submitting their exam sheets, Lot of times I would have this tendency, I would just write, I would never bother second checking it. I would never bother rereading or rechecking. Perhaps students can be encouraged. I know you're writing in a hurry, but before submitting, just check your work once again.
Okay.
Right?
Good.
So these are small ways in which checking, paying attention, concentration is expanded, it is stretched on. So I think giving students more time as much as possible where they spend time doing things carefully and mindfully.
Okay. Yes. Good. So this is a question from Madam Bhuvaneshwari from Tamil Nadu. So that's why I said you are being questioned from different states now. Do the situations we undergo trigger the relevant emotions to our subconscious mind, or is it the other way around? Situations trigger emotions to our subconscious mind, or is it the other way around?
Sometimes even in the absence of a situation, certain memories can get triggered. That is one thing. But it's most commonly found that we have a residual mass in our mind, which is almost like a collection of every experience we've undergone. And while not all of this information is accessible to our mind, sometimes the most painful ones, which we sometimes have, as a defense chosen to repress, remain somewhere at the back. And maybe those are the memories we have not processed completely. Because we've not allowed ourselves to process it. Now, when something familiar comes by our way, it can happen that some familiarity is what we hook onto. Generally found in trauma. When I'm talking, this is someone in the context of trauma I'm talking. It can unknowingly trigger an emotion. We might be very well aware of the thought, and it might mimic a very similar emotional response of what has happened in the past.
Okay. So I think Madam Bhuvaneshwari will be happy with what you have said. She is listening. We have a few more questions. I have my own, which I've kept it for last. This is a question from Madam Ramya Shetty, Dr. Ramya Shetty from SDM PG department. She says, is there a link between mindfulness and spiritual practices?
Yes. So you all might have noticed that. So mindfulness, though it began with a particular religion, but now we look at it as a very neutral concept and something which we can incorporate every day. But you all might have noticed that when you all are engaging in any kind of spiritual practice, anything that gives you meaning, you are attentive to it. You are completely immersed in it. You're completely in the flow of it. It could be praying. It could be maybe with your whole heart singing praises to God, or just spending reflections in spirituality. So there, mindfulness comes in. So that way, in order for us to be more spiritually aligned, mindfulness would help us.
Thank you, Raina. I think there are no more questions from the participants. They have a lot of observation, and everyone is thanking you for the beautiful words and thoughts you have put together to bring home this particular concept of mindfulness, emotional intelligence. Final question from my side. I saw one of your slide which read as, do we need to chase happiness all the time? So if not happiness, what are we chasing according to you?
Anything that might
because if a person is earning well, working very hard, it is for his family. There is an intention, a positive intention. His children should get the best of the education. He may not, or she may not be that educated, but the children should not suffer when it comes to education. Don't you think everyone is chasing happiness all the time? But the concept varies. Some see happiness in money. Some see happiness in that satisfaction of the work that they do. What do you have to say?
Definitely, it is true. Even I chase happiness a lot of times. But what I have also heard from somewhere and understood, that sometimes the more we try to chase happiness or run behind it, it somewhere indirectly reminds us that we need to chase it because we don't have it. So there's nothing wrong in wanting to hold on to a good moment for a long time or in making our lives better. But and in that sense, there's nothing wrong in chasing happiness. But like I said, it shouldn't turn into toxic positivity where we say that only good vibes are welcome, only happiness is welcome, and we become intolerant of any adversity, or we become intolerant of
Okay.
anything going wrong. So perhaps keeping a balance to that, as much as I would like to be happy and want to be happy, things, life is such that life will
Yeah.
throw anything at me.
Okay.
So being, I think, realistically hopeful.
Yeah. So still, I can't forget what you said. That sandwich part of it, beginning the day, end of the day. Then once again, that significant impact that the smallest of the things could have. Enjoy, find happiness in little of the minutest of the things. I think you'll be very happy. What I think that is fun. When we say poor people, they don't have money, but they're very happy. There are rich people who have a lot of money, but they are not happy. Just the differences of opinion. It's all in between these 2 years. Because Shalini madam, whenever she would meet me, she'll simply say, all that happens in your life is between these 2 years. She'll say, just focus there. Everything should be fine. She'll say every time. So, Raina, thank you very much. Your final thoughts to all our participants who are listening and watching you.
Right. So definitely a lot has been said about the whole topic, perhaps the whole thing on mindfulness. Just taking it one step further, from what I have read, from what I've understood, from some of my friends' experiences, from what I have modeled and learned from them, oftentimes, and also drawing, and this is what you've reminded me right now, Manoj sir, that about being grateful and about having gratitude.
Correct.
Because a lot of times when we feel we are suffering and in a lot of pain, a lot of times we completely dismiss things that are going right, things that are actually going fine. And life is not as bad. So somewhere paying attention to things to be grateful about is like, I think, one thing which has stayed with me, and something that maybe you can try to incorporate in your daily lives, that it's not just about thinking conveniently about being grateful only in hard times, but why not making it a daily practice? So it's kind of like any information we take in our mind, there is a neural network. There's like almost a print that is there in our mind. It becomes like a road. The more we use that road, the stronger it becomes, the more easily accessible it becomes with least amount of effort. Why not we create a road of a gratitude road, so that so the more we feed into that road, the more we are familiar with that road, it becomes almost spontaneous to feel grateful every now and then. And it's not that we just think about doing it when we are feeling low. So it's kind of a takeaways. More you expose yourself to one thing, more you feed into one thought, it stays. It stays like a print.
All right, good. Yes, Raina, thank you very much. But then while you're talking, I recollected another question, which, if you don't mind, you can answer. Suppose we are not teachers. The participants here are not teachers. Suppose they were all students. All the people who are listening to you are all students. What would your approach be to your participants then?
It wouldn't change so much because thankfully mindfulness has been such a skill that it does not really discriminate based on professions, age groups, teachers. It's like a very simple funda, to put it in that sense. It's about you choose how you want to apply it. Rather than me like perhaps prescribing, the simple act of being attentive will unfold a lot of things. What is relatable to you, what is applicable to you. But perhaps for students, I would want to tell them that maybe you can use mindfulness to also feel realistically hopeful. To know that, because especially this is the age where there are a lot of adjustments that we have to make in life. One is perhaps adjusting to either study further, get a job somewhere, separating from our parents, healthily separating from our parents, making new friends, making, having new colleagues, perhaps adjusting to the workplace. it can get a lot, it can get overwhelming, and there will be times that we might doubt ourselves a lot. I know 20s is the age where sometimes a lot of self doubt begins. We feel we are not enough. And this, coming to the whole theme of the conference of technology,
Yeah.
that again fuels our self doubts very indirectly. And this is a fact
Okay.
that everyone we may know, that the more we see things on social media, especially of other people, we somehow think that they have very sorted lives.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
We think that they have very sorted lives, and it again makes us feel like perhaps we're lacking something. But again,
Okay.
catching yourselves there and recognizing that, okay, I know I'm having this self doubt, but
Okay.
perhaps it might not be so true. So I think for students and teenagers, it would be helpful to use mindfulness more in terms of realistically looking at your self esteem and capabilities and your
Okay.
mastery over things.
Okay. Very good. I think I'm, what should I say? That 1 hour and 15 minutes that we have spent, it has been really fruitful for the time that, as a commerce teacher, I would say, I really invested my time, this 1 hour and 15 minutes, and I got beautiful returns listening to you. Every word that you said, I have almost whatever you said, I have recorded. Some I have kept in my mind, some I have kept in my notepad for things that you have said. Everyone has been very, very appreciative. A lot of congratulations. They have said you have done exceedingly well. Your presentation has been good. But one difference that I would like to put forward between you and Shalini ma'am is Shalini madam speaks very slowly, and you are a little fast. That's the only difference. Otherwise, I think things put on the plate. I think the buffet served is same from both the people, whether it's listening to Shalini madam or whether it's listening to you, Raina. So, Raina, on behalf of my college, on behalf of all my colleagues, on behalf of all the participating teachers, students, and chartered accountants who are there in this webcon, a big thank you to you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we can see Raina on screen. I think we can put our hands together for her, and we'll see a brighter future for our country with young people like you, doing exceedingly well. So, congratulations, Raina. All the very best, and thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for your kind attention.
Yes, thank you, Raina.
Thank
Yes,
you.
and Shalini madam, I saw in the background, she was all smiles. Dear participants, you can see the smile on my face because when we began yesterday in the morning, it was very simple. What are going to be the takeaways of this international webcon? The major takeaway that I wanted is a smile on everyone's face, and this smile is like the lamp that will never be lit. It will never go off. I beg your pardon, it will never go off. It should stay with us throughout our life. We need to be happy. I will just put together some words, some statements that were the takeaways from all the 4 sessions plus the keynote address. Deep breathing, focusing on every breath, which I don't think we normally do. Spend a little fruitful time on practicing yoga, meditation. Introspection, sandwich concept of Raina that she just mentioned. Today is going to be a beautiful day. I'm going to make it beautiful, come what may. And before we close eyes for the night, tomorrow, one thankfulness for living a beautiful day, and tomorrow is going to be yet another beautiful day. You can do it feeling all the time. Attitude of gratitude. Motivating oneself all the time. Be at peace with yourself. Be non-judgmental. Appreciate others. Smile. Switch off for a while. Stay positive all the time. And paying attention to the minutest of the things. Remember, today when you take bath, the soap, the lather, the fall of water on your head as the drops of water is moving on to your body down, then the the bath towel, the smoothness of it. These are the smallest things that we need to enjoy, and these are the things that I believe that we have learned in this 4+1 keynote plus the 4 sessions that we have. So to all the participants from my college and from all my colleagues, including my principal, Dr. Tara Rao, a big thank you, gratitude to all of them for joining us and helping us put this WebCon to what it is today. In these 2 days, we have had some technical issues, but then as Raina clearly mentioned, am I to worry on things that are not within my control? The answer is no. I am not worrying at all. But for those who have been present, those who have not been present, I can still see a few messages that they were not able to join a little later. Maybe this video that we're going to send them will definitely be helpful to them. So once again, thank you to all of you all. Thank you for making this WebCon really successful. Thanks to all of them, and special thanks to Dr. Purushottam for disciplining all the participants, especially when your video is on. Thank you, Dr. Purushottam, for that. I read that and I felt very happy about it. I will be sending the feedback form of today a little later. Once that is done, late in the evening, I will put another form for which you're supposed to fill in so that you get your certificate. So there is 2 forms that I'm going to present or post in the group. One is relating to the feedback of the second day. That is the morning session, the 3rd session, and the session taken by Ms. Raina right now. So 3rd and the 4th session. After that feedback is given, there will be another form, and that form is specifically for your certificate. So please be careful while filling the second form, which I will share a little later in the evening, so that those who are here right now can fill this feedback form of day 2. So participants, with a promise that we are going to join once again. There are a lot of plans coming up in future. Hope you all will be a part of it. It's a genuine attempt to get the best of the speakers or get the best speakers from across the globe for our presentation. And we'll continue in this journey of educating and enhancing teachers' abilities. So thank you very much. See you sometime soon again. Thank you.
Thank you.